p.m. East Coast time in the United States, and you are watching our bumper. And get ready to have a good time and hear the truth, because standing by in our studio is Whitney Ward, standing by in our chat room is everybody else, and the bumper's running. We're recording it. We're streaming YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and who knows where else. We'll start a countdown to Studio 36 Alpha starting now. Well, good evening and welcome to it. Let me move the Gatorade and replace it with some coffee. This is the coffee mug we're using tonight because my dear wife decided it would be a good idea to wash not one but both of my travel mugs that I use here in the PJNet studio. So I'm stuck with a ceramic mug like everybody uses. Starting a new week, and what better way to start it out with somebody who is well known to all the PJNet family and farther in places far beyond that. But she hasn't been with us in a while, and we thought we would check in with Whitney Ward, who is standing by in her studio, compliments of her grandfather. And Whitney, it's good to see you again. I think I looked, it's been since last year. It's been over a year.
You're right.
Since we have visited, and I know a lot has happened here, but you have been very busy. In fact, oops, cameras turn things around. Folks, behind me, over my shoulder, you will find oh, okay. Hey, your camera doesn't reverse things. You ever notice how some people's camera flips it? You know.
It's not. It doesn't.
No. I mean, I can flip it if you want. From here, but but Whitney is a published author, and that's a journey in and of itself. But Whitney, I was intrigued, or I know the reason, but it's no coincidence. The title, More Than Your Mountains. The word more is in uppercase letters. Now, this is not because you want to scream more. There's actually a much deeper reason.
Yeah, there is. First of all, I want to say thank you for having me on so I can chat about my book. It means a lot. But for those who don't know, I have a chronic illness that's caused by a gene mutation, and I was the first person in the world to be discovered with it. The National Institutes of Health is who discovered it, and they gave me this honor, this incredible honor. They allowed me to help name my disease, and so the name that I chose, it fit all the scientific protocol that it needed to, but I wanted it to have depth and, have hope attached to it. So the name that I found that I absolutely loved was Magus syndrome, and that means more in Latin. So more has just kind of been my message and my platform, because I want people to know that they are more than the mountains they face. And the people who's going to be diagnosed with Magus syndrome, I want them to know there's hope attached to the very thing that's supposed to defeat them. And, so it's not such a dreary and depressing thought. They can know I am more than this. Yes, I have this disease, but it doesn't define me. I define this disease. So, yeah, that's the story behind more. And so I just wanted to capitalize on that and make it as large as possible for people to see.
As if it needed more topspin.
Ooh.
Mountains.
Yes.
Mountain or mountains is an integral part of the Whitney Ward brand.
It is. Yeah, I was just, thinking, what do I want my platform to be? What's my testimony and message? What do I want to say? And I've faced a lot of mountains in my life, huge mountains, medically, socially, emotionally, because that's the thing with a chronic illness. It just doesn't affect you physically. It affects you emotionally and socially as well, because of all that you miss out on when you have a chronic illness. And so, yeah, those were like mountains. and I'm more than those mountains, and I'm going to keep climbing them. And so that is going to be the theme of my life. I am more than those mountains that life brings, because God gives me the strength to scale them.
Well, you've even gone beyond that. So many people, whether it's chronic illness,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's financial difficulties, relation, whatever the mountain is,
Mm-hmm.
uh, so many people never even get past denial.
Yeah.
But if they do, they begin to get angry, even angry at God. And these are not the kinds of things that are going to work you through it. At some point, you have to get out of denial and say, "This is what it is. What is? Does this mean that God has no plan for my life, or does this mean this is the room I find myself in? This is the
Yeah.
pot that I am planted in. Let's bloom in the
Mm-hmm.
pot we're planted in."
Yeah.
You've gone beyond that, Whitney. You've had to adapt, you've had to struggle, but now you have made it your mission to
Yes.
reach out to others
Yeah.
who tell their stories. And tell us about your podcast.
Yeah. So mountain climbers, oh my goodness. I love doing that. I love investing in others and hearing other people share their story. In 2019, I was at a writing conference,
I
and
know.
God just put this vision in my heart to start a podcast called Mountain Climbers. And so what I do is I bring people on who have faced some really big mountains, whether it be infertility, uh, marriage issues, spiritual warfare, and they share how God has helped them climb that mountain. And what I love when I talk to them is you can see the weight they carried when they're explaining, this is what I went through, and then it just shifts, and you see that joy when they talk about, but this is how God got me on the top of my mountain, and I was able to climb, and these are my mountaintop views. And we talked about this before we went on, but a lot of times, you don't get the joy with the
Oh, excuse me.
you're
I don't
good.
have a way to mute. My mic doesn't have a mute button. Yours does.
Yes, it does. Don't mute me. Or hopefully I won't mute myself. Yeah, I really believe in order to get to the joy, you have to go through some pain, and we talked about that. And it's interesting. You talked about the anger and the denial, and that those kind of emotions. And we're human, so we're going to have those emotions. God understands that, and I think almost like you said, acknowledging those emotions, getting out of that denial, it helps us get through what we need to get through so we can take that first step, shift our focus, say, okay, I got to work through the denial, the pain, the anger. And I think that helps us to take that first step and start climbing up the mountain.
Whitney, I'm trying to reconstruct the chronology. You said you went to a writers' conference. I think I know the one you're talking about in 2019.
Yeah,
Was that the Ohio Christian Writers, or was that the North Carolina?
it was actually Right to Publish in Chicago.
Ah, you went to
Yeah,
that? Oh,
I went to that. It was amazing. Amazing.
I can only imagine. I know a few that have gone.
Hmm.
But I've seen your podcast grow. And, well, the thing that impresses me the most is that you have sustained it. So many people start things, and you've had to take some intermissions along the way because of your condition. But your commitment has not changed. Your
Nope.
ability to fulfill it has been interrupted from time to time. Most people start things, try it out,
Hmm.
that didn't set the world on fire, so they quit.
Yep.
And that's not the way the successful people did things. They weren't an instant success, most of them, the
Mhm.
vast majority of them.
Yeah.
But somewhere in there, this book. So, how did you weave in which came first? The inspiration for the podcast, the inspiration of the book, and how did you juggle those
Yeah.
competing responsibilities?
So the vision for the book came first. I wrote this book in 2018, and Michelle Medlock Adams actually was a huge mentor with this book and helped me think through it. And then after I wrote it, she edited it for me. But I just thought about all the things that I had to face as a child, and that were scary, and I didn't like going through them. But you kind of grit your teeth and you do it. And I know so many other kids who are going through this this very thing, and so I wanted to help them because I didn't know of many books like that in the children's market
Mm-hmm.
to help other children who have chronic illness. And thousands of kids have chronic illnesses in this world. And so I wrote that first because I wanted to encourage them and just let them know they're seen, they're validated, and they're victorious. And just cheer them on. And I wanted them to know they're not alone. This
Mm-hmm.
book, I didn't have to research it. I didn't have to talk to people. I lived it.
Mm-hmm.
So I could write it from experience and say, so many times people say, I understand what you're going through. Like, well, you haven't been through it, so maybe you can emphasize, but can you truly understand it? And what I like about this is that I do understand it. And so, I can kind of be that advocate and cheerleader for the children who are facing so many things that I did as a child. That's just not a fun thing to go through. But thankfully, there is joy in the midst of the circumstances. And if you look, you can find it. And, I want them to see that. And so that came first. And then out of the blue, at the writing conference in Chicago at Write to Publish, 2019, it just came to me. It's like God just dropped this idea for mountain climbers, because I recognize that, even though chronic illness is a huge mountain and it's something that I face, there's all other kinds of mountains. And, there's other people who are facing those mountains, and they need help. They need encouragement. They need to know that they're seen and that other people are going through it as well. So that's why I wanted to do mountain climbers, so I could touch on everyone's mountain and hopefully help them climb. 'Cause to me, the first step to climbing is taking that initial first step. That's like the hardest thing to do, is that first step. But once you get going, you'll see God will just continue to give you strength to get up that mountain.
Well, Whitney, I want to point out that there's a lot of misconception out there that that Christians are kind of immune from this kind of thing. God doesn't let that happen to Christians. There's another kind of a mythological, myth. There's a series of movies that I really admire. I really sincerely admire, and it's the Kendrick brothers. But their movies, and those movies were produced right up the road from me here, about 90 miles in Albany, Georgia. And I really admire their ministry, but I do have a criticism of their movies, in that they all follow the same kind of flow. Okay, you start out with a person lost in sin, doesn't, and their life, and as a result of the choices they've made, their life runs off the rails. They hit the bottom. They look up. They find Jesus, and all of a sudden, their world turns into happiness. Well, that is certainly not outside of the providence of God, and there are plenty of stories to prove it, testimony. But chronic illness, when you say getting through it, you're not necessarily talking about the disappearance of symptoms. You're not talking about a cure. You're talking about living with it and reconciling yourself to it. And this is a myth breaker, in my opinion, and I think this is why your message is so important, because we tend to focus on the pain. And that's not who we are.
No, you're so right about that. And, I believe in instantaneous healing. I've seen it. I know it can happen. And I also know that there's healing that takes a journey. And that is my healing. And I think why God has chosen that is some of the smartest doctors in the world have to admit, okay, there's a higher power and miracles do exist. Like my doctors at the NIH, they said you're a miracle. We can't explain it because scientifically speaking, you shouldn't even be here. And to take that a step further, you talked about the myth that, people think that Christians shouldn't, have diseases or should pray through it and it will go away or that kind of thing. That is a hard point with me because, I've had people ask, like, why don't you pray your disease away? I've had someone who pretty much insinuated that I was demonically possessed.
Yeah. Yeah. What sin do you need forgiveness of to cure your body? Something like that.
Exactly. Then she proceeded to get her leader to do an exorcism. It was awful. But that's why I love that the Bible has this story about the blind man who had been blind since birth, and the disciples, they asked Jesus, who sinned? Who sinned?
Right.
Was it his parents or was it him? And Jesus is like, no one did. He has this to show the glory of God. And I think that's why some people have, illnesses, not because God doesn't like them or, wants to curse them, but he wants to show that, he is powerful and he can work miracles in people's life. And a lot of times the hugest miracle in someone having a chronic illness is finding the joy to keep on going and the strength to keep on going, because you're pointing it, to the Lord and what he's doing for you. So yeah, I have a very hard time with people who say those kind of things about people who have chronic illnesses. I had a guy last year. I told him, he asked how I was doing, and I was like, well, I have a sinus infection, like I, am not feeling well. And he's like, well, have you ever prayed about it? What? Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, of course I've prayed. I've prayed my whole life about this. And I was like, but I believe in instantaneous healing, and I believe in, healing that takes a journey. And my healing is taking a journey. And he's like, well, I don't believe that. And I'm like, well, believe what you want to believe, but I beg to differ. So.
Whitney, time is really slipping away from us. There's a couple of things I wanted to make to get in here before we signed off tonight. As you mentioned that Michelle Medlock Adams was a huge mentor in your journey to publishing this book, but I also see from the chat room you had some help from for editing and writing proposals and all that kind of stuff from Sherry Lynn Bispano.
I love Sherry Lynn. I met her at my very first writing conference in 2017, and we just clicked immediately, and we've kept in touch ever since. She's like a spiritual writing mother to me and just has always encouraged me. I can go to her for anything and ask her to pray or get her advice, and she's always right there. Everyone needs a Sherry Lynn in their life.
Yeah, there's that short list we all have. There's one very important point that I wanted to make before we wrap up, is that I wanted to ask you a question. Is there any schools in your area that you have not yet gone to read your book to the children there?
Yeah, there is, because my county is very odd in how it's set up. We're set up in townships, and each township has a school, and there's 12 townships. So I have like seven schools, elementary schools left, and that's not including, which I'm going to these two, like there's a vocational school that has a preschool. There's like a preschool by itself. It's not affiliated with any, charter school, and going there. And so, yeah, still have quite a bit to go. And then eventually I am going to start giving books and doing readings in the county next to me called Pike County. I live in Scioto County. and I'll be going to Pike County to give books and do readings. So very excited.
Well, I would see these, you would post it on Facebook, and my heart would just leap for joy because to take your book to those children, I am very concerned about some of the material that's being presented to our children in schools and in libraries. But, you know, it's very easy, Whitney, to damn the
Yeah.
darkness. But you are one of the few that has lit a candle in the lives of those young children by reading them some positive, spiritually sound, biblically sound, theologically sound doctrine, but at the same time entertaining them and making friends and helping them along their way. And I just can't say enough good about what you're doing. And by the way, it parenthetical, it's a marketing genius. It's the perfect play for marketing. I mean, what
Yeah.
better, you know, gosh, you know, there's so many schools, so many children, so many parents. The tentacles of the influence
Yeah.
of that part of your ministry, which is
Mhm.
also marketing,
Yeah.
is something I would like to see more of, and maybe they'll come back to you and they'll name it something because you were the first to do it. I don't know, but
Yeah. Well, it was definitely, I know we probably don't have time to get into it, but it was amazing how God opened those doors to allow me to read to the
well,
schools.
keep opening those doors. Keep walking through those doors as they open. Whitney, we are very, very proud of you and glad to see your book doing well and you doing well. And look forward to seeing more or actually seeing more podcasts. You're one of the few that do them on camera.
Yeah.
But not only seeing, but hearing, and all the wonderful guests that you've had along the way. And thank you for taking time out to visit with us here on PJNet.
Yes. Well, thank you for having me.
Glad to do it. Well, folks, that was Whitney Ward here on PJNet.tv, and the fun is only beginning. By the way, you're going to hear more about chronic pain tomorrow night. First time guest. Can't wait to share that with you. But at the bottom of the hour, Casper Stockham will visit with us from the great state of Colorado. And I've got to switch studios and do a bunch of housekeeping, and get another cup of coffee if I have time. Would you contemplate a couple of questions while we're kind of doing all that? What is the boldest thing that you've ever done for Jesus Christ? And then, how long ago was that? Folks, if we're going to climb the mountain, we're going to need courage. So I hope that none of us will be satisfied with our answers to either of those two questions.